Welcome to Jennette's Pier!
I'm Meredith.
I'm Rachel.
You're now at Jennette's Pier on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Of course, we're a fishing pier, but we're also part of North Carolina Aquariums.
And today you're going to be watching some of our virtual programs so you can learn wherever you are. Today we're going to be learning all about squid and we're going to do a dissection. Hi, today we're going to be doing a squid dissection. But like with any animal, we want to learn a little bit about it before we dissect it. So we are going to be learning about something called taxonomy. And what taxonomy is the way that scientists group different living things in the world. So the biggest one is going to be kingdom, and that's going to be the animal kingdom. That's the one that we are in, and it's the same as the squid. But when we get a little bit more specific, we have some characteristics that make us unique. We're in a group called mammalia, or mammals, and there's a couple different things that make us unique to being a mammal. One is going to be that we have hair or fur. The other one is that we produce milk. So we know that our squid is not going to be in the group of mammalia because they don't have hair or fur and they don't produce milk. So they're going to be in a group that we call mollusca. And mollusca actually means soft body. So that is one of the characteristics that is going to be unique to them. So all of our animals in our mollusca group have a soft body. Another characteristic that we know that mollusks have, or what they don't have, is a backbone. So in order to be a mollusk, you have to be missing a backbone. And if you don't have a backbone, we call you an invertebrate. And one last thing, it's not true of every single one, but it is true of most of them. They're going to have a shell. So in our mollusca group, we have three more specific categories that we're going to be talking about. The first one is called a bivalve. The second one is called a gastropod. And then last but certainly not least is going to be our cephalopod. So we know we have these big words right here, and the way that we're going to figure out what they mean is we're going to break them apart into their parts. So we have this word bi right here. We know that the word bi means two, like a bicycle has two wheels. Now a valve is something that we see a lot, and it has lots of different purposes, but basically what it does is it opens and closes. Now something that opens and closes that we use in our everyday life is going to be a door. So valve means door. So we're going to think about our animals that have a soft, squishy body, that don't have a backbone, and maybe have a shell. And they're going to have two doors. Those two doors are going to be their two shells. And I have a couple bivalves here. I have a clam, and I have an oyster. So now I only have one of these, but we know that they have two shells. And the reason they have those two shells is so they can protect themselves. Because remember, we have this super soft, squishy body, so we want to make sure that we're protecting it. So some of our most common bivalves, like we said, we have clams, we have oysters, another one that we see are mussels, and then the last one, we have scallops. Now we're going to move on to our gastropods and our cephalopods. And we see this word that they have in common, the word pod. Now you may have heard the word pod in lots of different scenarios, but in this scenario, pod is going to mean foot. Kind of like the tripod that we're using right now has 3 feet to hold it up. We also have this word gastro right here, and it has the word gas in it. Gastro is going to mean stomach. Now this may seem odd to think of something as a stomach foot, but again we come back to our words that we learned in the beginning. We know they have a soft, squishy body, they don't have a backbone, and maybe they have a shell. Now our stomach feet, what that means is that they use their stomach as their foot and their foot as their stomach. So they're going to be crawling on the bottom of the ocean on their stomach. They're going to use it to get around. And one of our gastropods that we have a lot around here in the Outer Banks is going to be a whelk. And our whelk is going to be a sea snail. And they're going to use that stomach to crawl across the ocean floor. So we have our whelk. Another one that we see a lot is called a moon snail, and their shell looks similar to the one that you might have seen on hermit crabs or like Gary from SpongeBob. Now we have our last one here, our cephalopod, last but not least. Now the word cephalo is a little bit tricky, but basically all it means is head. So again, kind of odd, head, foot, doesn't make a lot of sense, but we think back again, soft body, no backbone, maybe a shell. And these guys are basically going to be a head with a lot of feet attached to it. So we know, because we haven't talked about it yet and we're doing a squid dissection, our squid is going to be one of those cephalopods. We also have our friend the octopus. We have a cuttlefish. And then lastly, we have this kind of crazy one. This is the only one in here that has a shell, called the nautilus. So all of these guys, what they have in common is that they have a head with lots of feet attached to it. But there is something that's different about them from the rest of our friends in here, is they don't have a shell. Like I said in the beginning, not all of these guys are going to have a shell. One of them does, but these three are missing their shell. And we know that they have a soft, squishy body, so they're super vulnerable, so they have to protect themselves somehow. So there's a few different ways that they will protect themselves. The first one is that they squirt ink, right? That's probably something that you have heard of a lot when you think about an octopus or a squid. So they're going to shoot out ink when they're scared, and they're going to swim away while their predator is distracted. The second thing they can do is they can fit into really, really tiny spaces. So we know that they don't have bones, so as long as they can fit that tough beak through a spot, they're going to be able to fit in there. So they'll squeeze themselves into tiny little rocks to get away from predators. And then the last thing that they'll do to protect themselves is they can camouflage. And they're better at camouflage than any other animals in the ocean. They can also change the texture of their skin, which is really, really cool. And we'll talk a little bit about how they do that when we move on to our dissection. Alright, so we're going to get started with our dissection here. So I have my nice little squid right here. This is about the average size that they're going to be for the species that we're working with. So we're going to talk about the different parts of our squid. So first things first, we notice our quote-unquote feet that we were talking about, but actually they are not feet at all. They are arms. So these 8 ones that they have right here are going to be their arms, and they have suction cups all up and down. They're going to use that to grip onto things like food. These 2 really long ones here are their tentacles, and they have suction cups just at the bottom, and these are going to mainly be for grabbing their food and pulling it into their arms. Now above their arms is what is going to be their head. So we have their head right here. And you'll notice that they have these 2 really big eyes on the sides of their head. One here and one here. We'll delve into those eyes a little bit later. Above their head is going to be this nice big part right here. This is going to be called the mantle. Now if you've ever eaten calamari, this is the part of the squid that you probably eat the most, although I know some adventurous folks like to eat the tentacles as well. The mantle is going to be where all of their organs are stored, and everything that comes in and goes out is going to be in there. Below the mantle, we have this little nice organ right here. This is called their siphon. And what the siphon is going to do is it's going to allow for things to go into the mantle and go out. So when they shoot ink, that is where all of that is going to come from. It's going to come out of the siphon. Then up at the top here, we have these 2 flaps. These are going to be their fins, and they use those to help them swim around. So remember, we talked about one of the fascinating things that squid can do for protection is that they can camouflage. Now the way that they do this is they have these dots in their skin. So these dots are going to be called chromatophores, and these are going to expand and contract based on what color they want to be. So you'll notice there's some lighter pink ones on this side, on their belly side, and then on their dorsal side or their back side they have some darker spots, darker chromatophores. So I have a really cool trick that I'm going to do. We call this the chromatophores last hurrah, and I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to rub along the squid skin, and what you're going to see is that spot is going to get nice and big and pink. So what happens is when I rub it, those chromatophores are going to react and they're going to get bigger. So that is what it's going to look like when we change into pink. So the first part of our dissection that we're going to do is we're going to explore how our squid is going to eat. So when we look at our squid, we notice that he's pretty small. So if you imagine what his mouth looks like, it's probably also not very big. So the things that he likes to eat are things that are small. And if you've learned about plankton, you know how small they can be, and he likes to eat things like that, like maybe tiny squid or tiny crabs or tiny shrimp or things like that. So his mouth is going to be located underneath all of those tentacles. So like I said before, he's going to use those two long tentacles to grab onto that food. And he's going to grip it nice and tight. He's going to pull it into those arms, which are going to hold onto it nice and tight, and then he's going to bring it into his mouth. So the way that we're going to find our squid's mouth is by pulling those tentacles and arms out of the way. So right here, we have our tentacles, and we're gonna move them out of the way, kind of like we're peeling a banana. When I do that, I see this little black dot in there, and that little black dot is their beak. And like I said before, that is the only really hard part in their body. Now, if I give my squid just a little squeeze, I can see that beak start to poke out. And I'm gonna go ahead and take my tweezers and I'm gonna pull that beak out. So here's one part of my beak. And the other part of my beak. Very small, no teeth, just gonna use it to grab that food. Now you may have noticed there's a kind of like a little bulb surrounding that beak. That is going to be their jaw muscle that helps clamp down on their food, and attached to that is going to be their esophagus, and you'll see how small that esophagus really is. So again, we know that they're not going to be eating anything super big. The next part that we are going to focus on for our dissection is going to be our squid's eyes. Now when we take a look at our squid's eyes, we notice that they are very, very big compared to their body size. Now the squid actually has the largest eye size relative to their body of any animal in the ocean. The reason that they have their eyes on the sides of their head is because they are typically seen as prey. And when you are prey, you have to be on alert at all times. You have to be looking around you constantly so you can make sure you're not going to get eaten. Another thing that's interesting about our squid's eyes is that they are colorblind. They cannot see color. They see lots of different shades of gray. Now that's a really common thing in a lot of animals in the ocean because it helps them see different shades of gray. And we know that when they're swimming around at night, you can't really see colors anyway. So it's really important for them to be able to see those different shades of gray very clearly. So something we're going to explore in our squid's eye is going to be the lens. And the lens is a really important part of our eye. It's going to help with the light. Now we know that a human lens is shaped like a contact lens. It's like a concave shape, like a little bowl. And we are seeing through the air. Now if you've ever tried to open your eyes in either a swimming pool or in the ocean on a really clear day, you know that everything looks really blurry, and that's because our lenses are not shaped to be able to see in the water. Now our squid's lens is going to be shaped like a sphere. It's like a little tiny marble or little tiny pearl. So we're gonna go ahead and cut into it and try to see what that lens looks like. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut a nice big slice because we have a couple layers of skin and we wanna get through that. And I am going to use my fingers so that I can feel where that lens is. And I have my little lens. And it looks like a little tiny marble or a little pearl. So now that we have been able to see our squid's mouth and its beak, and we've seen the lens inside the eye, we're gonna go inside of that mantle and get a good look at all the organs on the inside. And one thing we're gonna do while we're in there is we're gonna try to figure out if our squid is a male or a female. So you'll notice that I have my squid right here on its belly side. So its belly side is facing up. That's exactly how I want it to be all the time when I'm cutting into the mantle. And I'm gonna cut a nice straight line all the way up to the top. So right at the base of that mantle, right where that siphon is, all the way up to the top. All right. So we're gonna open it up, see if we have a boy or a girl. Now, there's a couple things that we notice right here. We have this little silvery gland right here. It almost looks like our squid has swallowed a fish. That's gonna be the ink sac, and it looks kind of small, but they can definitely make more ink once they run out. And they just use a little bit at a time, and they mix it in with some water. This gland right here is called the nidamental gland, and this is one indicator that's going to tell us that we have a female. So the nidamental gland is really important. That is what produces her eggs, and her eggs are going to be this right here at the top. It's kind of this clearish, silveryish goo at the top. Those are going to be all of her eggs. Now a boy is going to look a little bit different. So our boy is going to have kind of this whitish color, but it's going to be all up and down. There's not going to be any differential in the color. So now that we've seen if our squid is a girl or a boy, we're going to go ahead and pull it apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tentacles and my arms, I'm going to hold them. I'm going to use my tweezers to hold the mantle down, and I'm going to peel away. So now we have all our organs separated from our mantle. So we know that our squid has an ink sac, right? So our ink sac is really important, again, for its protection for survival. But something you may not know is that our squid also has a pen inside of it. Now this pen is right here along the back, along the dorsal side of our squid. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it out. Now it almost looks like it's made out of plastic. It almost looks like a straw wrapper, like from a Capri Sun. But what it is it's made out of the same type of material that our nails and our hair are made of. It's made out of keratin. And basically all this does is that it gives our squid some structure. So it helps it stay together and helps it group up so that it doesn't lay all floppy and have a little bit of a backbone. It's not quite a backbone because remember, our squid are invertebrates and they don't have backbones, but this is the closest thing that they have. So now that we have our pen and we have our ink sac, we're gonna go ahead and use it the way that we intended it. So I'm gonna take my scissors, I'm gonna cut that ink sac right open, and we have a nice good ink sac. Sometimes our squids don't have too much ink in them. This one is pretty good. And I can take that pen and I can give myself a little tattoo. Thank you so much for joining us for our squid dissection. I hope you guys learned a lot and you enjoyed it.